Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 5 of Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be doing a deep dive into a tool that probably almost everyone that works with NDI is using in every production, and that's the NDI Studio Monitor. So NDI Studio Monitor is one of the free tool sets, and we'll get to that, but there's a lot more behind it than meets the eye. So we want to really cover all that today. But before we get into that, as always, we invite you, if you have any questions or want to share anything, just post in the comments. And if you'd like to join us live on air, we have a link that you can come to, and somebody from the studio will get you on and we can have a conversation here on air. Okay, so let's get started, and probably the first place to start would be talking a little bit about sort of what we are already familiar with when it comes to Studio Monitor. So if I switch over to Studio Monitor over here, let's see, get myself and Studio Monitor on. Okay. So right now I have a second camera that's over here that hopefully isn't too distracting with the two of me here. But what you have normally with Studio Monitor is an interface where this is your menu with all of your controls. You have your PTZ controls here. You have your ability to go sort of full screen or into a windowed mode, and that's all sitting here. You have a gear control, and that will usually, if there is a device, it'll open up a browser with the control interface to that device, which is a very handy thing. And it varies for each device that you can be viewing using Studio Monitor. And if we come through and sort of, again, this is just the basics. If you look at how you would select a source normally, you have a list of all of your sort of what would basically be called sources here. And then in the NDI parlance, each source can have multiple streams coming from it. And so that's how this would be. Every any NDI source that you take is actually a source device and then a stream coming from that source device. And that's how you'll do everything with NDI. And one other thing that it might not be apparent is that every NDI stream really has a secondary low bandwidth stream. And that's typically used for doing things around just monitoring. So if you're using Studio Monitor as just a general reference monitor and you want to conserve bandwidth, you can actually go over here and in the settings and let's see, believe it's, yes, under video, there is a selection for low bandwidth. So these are sort of just all the basic stuff, but that lets you select the low bandwidth, lower resolution feed of Studio Monitor and drive your image with that. So that's really a start point for here. But if we are going to get into this in more detail, let's start to dive into what I would consider sort of like the top 8 features. And the first one is PTZ controls. Now, when we've mentioned this before, if you look at the Studio Monitor, you have your standard controls over here. And this gives you your sort of your pan and tilt controls. This gives you your zoom controls for all of that. You have your presets here, so I could have different presets that are set up and handle all of that. And you also have your autofocus here. One of the other things that you have the ability to do is you can use your keyboard to control everything that's going on with this. And so if I were to, for instance, want to handle my pan and tilt, I can actually just use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and it will let me do this sort of just a tap at a time. And you can even use control and the arrow keys to let you move this with a little more granular control. So if you're trying to tighten something up and get the framing just right, having those keyboard controls is just another way that you can manage your PTZ. And this goes the same page up, page down, I believe will work for autofocus. End and home and end will work for exposure. So again, all these things, and each of them work with just the home and end keys as well as the control keys. So that gives you a quick way to sort of jump in and fine tune any settings you have with your framing, exposure, and basically your entire setup for how you'd like your image to look. So that's just a sort of a simple thing, but a good to know and very useful. So before I get to the second thing that I want to talk about, I'd like to go over and jump into our comments. We have some comments that have been coming in, so definitely want to cover everything. So yes, Biz, this is what I have up my sleeve. So hopefully there's some things in here that will be useful to you. So, Aziz, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So, Samuel, thank you for joining. Always great to see you. So, this is a comment. This is a template that I had set up here. So let's see if we have something else in here. All right. So yeah, so this is stuff from that we had before. So we're actually having, just so everybody is aware, every single piece of this production is new today. So if there are a few glitches here and there, I apologize for that. So Michael, so hello, thanks for joining. It's always good to see you, Michael. So, and this is Con from the Netherlands. Thanks, Con. Great to see you. So, Jesper, hi, thanks for joining. So, Aziz is asking if you're seeing new lighting. You are seeing new lighting. We redid all the lighting in the set. It's a new lighting, new set. So, I can talk about that in the post show, Aziz, but thanks for noticing. So, Fritz, hello from cold Chicago. Yes, thank you. It's not that bad in New Jersey, but yeah, we've had our days as well. So he's John Simon says he's boycotting most products, but I'm glad you're still letting us get through. Thank you. I appreciate that, John. So thank you for joining. I'm sorry if I would not get the name right, but I am really glad you joined us. I believe there is an Android app that will let you capture screens. I would have to look that up though, because there's been ones that have been tried in the past that I don't know whether it's official or not. I know there's a camera app, an NDI camera app that NewTek released for Android, but I'm not sure if that's available yet as an NDI monitor app. So, you demand. Great to see you. Thanks for joining. I definitely appreciate it. Okay, so let's pick up. And the second thing in NDI Studio Monitor is overlays. And these overlays actually include alpha channel. So let me sort of do a little bit here so we can sort of see what this would look like. So if I go over to NDI Studio Monitor and I go to settings and I go down to overlay, I can select a source that I want to use as an overlay on top of my video, and that source can actually contain alpha channel. So in this case, I set something up with, I believe it's here. So here is an example of something that you could put over, and this is just an output from vMix, which has an alpha channel. This is done as a title, but this could be something where if I had a host in the studio or somebody in a control room that was a producer that was monitoring things, I could actually take and put information relevant to the source that is up there. So that could include like just names and where they're located. It could also include like notes. So if I wanted to send notes, I could do this almost like I would do things that could be in a title. So I could change the message that's being seen down here. So if in a studio I had like 4 or 5 different canned messages, I could actually just pick that with a Stream Deck and put a new message up for something that people in the studio or producer would need to do. This could be somebody controlling a remote guest, something with, like LiveToAirZ or something. I could also monitor their state, and I can also have things like reference timers. So if I did this though as a countdown, you could actually now, as somebody's talking, you could have this do a sort of a time countdown so they know how to pace the conversation. But on top of that, just like this is something we just set up as a simple trigger in vMix, when this timer reaches the end, we can actually have this flip and put on a brand new overlay that will just say like something like wrap up the discussion now. So this is something that's in Studio Monitor that you can use to sort of power through everything that you have that's messaging and information based that you may want to share with people in the studio that are doing things distinct from what overlays that you would put on screen for a actual production. So this gives you sort of a secondary way of overlaying information and swapping those overlays to communicate sort of urgency for things like here to wrap things up because you got to go to your next segment. So that was the second part that I wanted to cover here. So the third is tally support. Now, this tally as a background, so let me sort of just take the overlays off here. Give me a second. So go to settings, overlay, and I'm just going to set this back to none. So what tally gives you is a way to know if the source that I'm looking at is in preview or program. So inside of Studio Monitor, it can pick up tally information that can come from a switcher like vMix, OBS, TriCaster. So right now, I'm going to just click this camera feed and I'm going to put it into preview. So when I do that, you now see that I have this green bar on top. And if I cut this in and put it on program, it now goes red. So this gives me that tally feedback. So I will know when I'm looking at this source what their status is. And so it would let me know, for instance, if I have an IFB and I'm controlling, conversations with somebody, I know whether they're on air and off air and understand how I would need to communicate with them. So that's a secondary thing that we have here that can be very, very useful. Okay, so that's a simple thing. Let me pick on the next thing though, and that is the ability to flip the display. So one of the things that I have found, because we've gone through different ways to do teleprompting for different use cases, and it's really fine if you're using a text-based teleprompter, because most things in a prompter give you the ability to just sort of flip and reverse the text. But if I'm doing something where I'm trying to show something that's on screen, say I'm in a meeting and I want to be able to present something on screen, that isn't helped with a teleprompter unless the prompter monitor itself can do that flipping for you. Some do, but they tend to be very expensive. So something you can do with this to give you this ability is you can go and I can, inside of the settings, video, I can say flip horizontal. So if I do that, I'll just do this quickly. You can see it just flips them on around us. So now everything is backwards. But in a, sorry, go here. Let me turn that off. But this now gives me the ability to set this up on my prompter monitor and then flip it reverse so that I now can see this normally and interact with it by looking at the prompter, and it's not everything backwards that's on my screen. So that can be very useful. And the way you can do that is there is another free application that comes with the NDI tools called screen capture. And so if I do a screen capture from my screen and then put that into an NDI monitor, that will now give me the the ability to capture any one of my screens and to flip it around so I can see it on a teleprompter. So that can be very, very useful as a prompter-based app. So hopefully that's something else that you'd be able to leverage. The other thing potentially though, is it also can flip vertically and horizontally. So if I had to flip a monitor upside down, say I was ceiling mounting something and I couldn't turn it, for the correct orientation, you have that ability as well. So very, very useful in those edge case situations where you just have to mount a monitor in some sort of special way. So let's see. The next thing that I probably want to talk about is NDI recording. And this is great if you actually want to make sure you can capture whatever you're monitoring on your studio monitor and maybe use it as a backup recording in case you have something that faults out with your main recorder on your switcher system or something. And this is done in two pieces. So if I go back to the menu and go to settings, and then I believe it's, let me try to remember where this is. Maybe up in application. Yes, set recording path. So in the application section, I can go and say, set the path I want. So any place on my system, any drive that's accessible from my system, I can set up a directory and set that as my recording path. And then down here, if I click on this, it'll just start recording. And you can see it's doing a countdown and telling me how much time it's recording. Then I can stop that. And that will create a perfect copy of whatever you are capturing through NDI on this monitor. And something really important with this means NDI already has done the compaction. So you have an encoded video and audio streams coming in through NDI. So all the system has to do to record this is it pulls off the framing, the NDI framing, and just puts the proper framing to do the recording. So it's not doing any special encoding or decoding or anything like that. It is just a data copy. So it is incredibly efficient, very low resource demanding. So it means you can run it on almost any other system that you would be running Studio Monitor on. And that can be extremely useful as that backup. So you always have a second recording going on. And you could do this, just take whatever your program out is, and you could do that. You could do it as a clean feed. Say your streaming system doesn't let you do a clean feed record. You could set a second output, which is just your system without your program out without any overlays, and do a recording on Studio Monitor, things like that. So definite use cases for that are very production centric and probably something that would be useful for all of us here. So, all right, so let me see, what's the next thing here? Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is web control. So in Studio Monitor, you have the ability to control all of the elements of Studio Monitor using a web interface. And there are actually two ways, so we'll get into them. But the first one, if we jump over, is you can actually, let me sort of go over to my screen here. So I can go over here, and if you go into settings, I believe it's over here, you have the ability to say, I want to allow web control, and it can say, show the web control URL, which just basically it means that's 10.0.0.178. So that's how I would control this. And if I go to that, I'll just sort of slide this over since I have this already opened up. If I go to that address, you actually now have an interface that lets you do things like you can pick which monitor you want this on. You can pick all of the sources and streams that we have. So if I pick a source here and I do that, it then shows you what are the streams that are associated with that source. So things of that sort are there. I can turn overlays on and off. So, and pick what I want as my overlay. I can do picture in picture, something we didn't talk about because it's not necessarily as useful, but start recording, show UV images, mute audio. All these things are now controllable from this browser-based interface. And we did this on a previous Streaming Alchemy show, I think probably like 2 seasons ago. You also can control this. So let me see if I can just show you this, make sure I got this all set. Let's see. You can actually control this using JSON commands. And this would be something called curl that I'm using here, but you could do this in vMix scripting, anything you'd want with that. And what this will let you do is basically tell Studio Monitor to do certain things. So let me just give you a quick rundown of what you're seeing here. Curl is a Windows command that will, it's a sort of Unix, Windows, you can use it on Mac. It's a pretty generic line command that will allow you to execute a web-based action. And so in this case, it starts out where you say curl, and it says, what's the content type? So inside controlling Studio Monitor, mostly it's packed up using JSON, which is something we covered in previous shows. So I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but it basically says, send this command, we're formatting it in JSON, and I want you to execute a post command, which is when there's get and there's post. So the post command is sort of pushing this out. And the data that I want in this post command, the data that I'm posting, is going to be this structure here, which is saying this is to select an NDI source. So this is saying this is version 1, selecting an NDI source is the command. This is the source name, exactly how you'd see it. And this is the location that I want, the URL that I want you to post that data set to. And that's exactly how this would all operate. So anytime you want to send a command, this is what you're doing. You're structuring this. Again, this show isn't about sort of digging into how to do this in detail, but it is something that will let you sort of understand basically how this can be handled if you want to dive in and start to do some stuff. So this is something you could do using central control. You can use companion, and you can set this up to control your Studio Monitor now with a Stream Deck or something like that. The other thing is I have this GitHub location. Let me see if I can sort of push this up here. So this is a really cool website, which basically lists the JSON commands and all the curl commands you'd need for all the different types of things you'd want to do in Studio Monitor. So it isn't in the show notes right now, but I'll definitely post it in there. But this will give you a basically the list of all the commands you can use if you want to control Studio Monitor remotely. And so you have the web interface and you have the curl interface, which is probably the two levels where the web is pretty straightforward and using curl or scripting or other things is the next level. But that's all sitting there and definitely a very, 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 very useful thing. So let me, before we go on, let me just go and check if we have some more comments here. So let's see. Okay, so bravo, Dan. Thank you for joining. I definitely appreciate you making the time to be with us. So, Fritz, okay. Yep. Thank you. We've seen Fritz. Let's see. So, okay, I think like I said, we have a few things that we're still working through on this. So, sorry, but yeah, so Biz is saying the clean feed is a good tip. So yeah, thank you. That's just, again, lots of different use cases for some of these things we can do with Studio Monitor. And so Aziz is asking, how would I send it to an encoder to record or stream from a laptop? Okay, well, actually, that's going to be the next topic I'll cover. So just hold on for a minute, and I will get into that, Aziz. But thank you for asking that. That's a really timely timely question there. So so Bowles promo, instant replay isn't on the list. It isn't something you can do directly using Studio Monitor. So I didn't really, get into sort of the additional ways that you can leverage Studio Monitor in other elements. But yes, there are lots of things you can do with instant replay in Studio Monitor. And it isn't going to be part of the show though. So sorry about that. But thank you for joining us. So, Spatial, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Oh, and happy 2025 to everyone here. Really grateful for this. And we're pretty happy. There's a lot of work we did sort of over the past few months, especially over the holidays, to try to get the new set and lighting everything ready. So thank you. Okay, so let me see. So the next thing I want to show here is, let's see if we have this. Okay, is NDI routing. So let me show you how you can do this, because this is a very useful thing, and this is specifically how things would work if I wanted to take what I was seeing and send this out to another source for different types of encoding or whatever. So what I'm going to bring over here, so we'll be able to sort of see these together, and I'll sort of shrink this up. Actually, since I'm doing this, I'll just sort of show this as a, when you are setting things up, you can actually turn around and move things to different quadrants. So this allows me to take an NDI feed and sort of set this up. And then I can do the same over here. And when I'm setting this up, I can turn around and say, move this to a quadrant. It should try to move it to wherever it thinks the closest quadrant is on the screen. It's just something useful to know. But what I can do in this NDI Studio Monitor here is I can go in and I can, in the settings, let's see, it's probably video. I can turn around and say, it would be output, sorry. I can turn around and say, send an NDI video output. And what this will do is it will let me subscribe to this video output from another source. So I could have vMix could do it, another Studio Monitor, TriCaster, whatever. Now, whatever is in this monitor becomes a second source. So if I come up here, I will now see, if I go to Alchemy Studio, I now have Studio Monitor 1 showing here. And so if I take Studio Monitor 1, I think I have an overlay on here, so let me shut this off. Sorry about that. Turn this off. Oh, I did vMix output 1, excuse me. Sorry about that. I was wondering what was going on. Studio Monitor 1 here. So this is the same video that I have here. And now if I go up and I just change this, let's sort of say I'll take a video over here. This will change it, and then it will change it in the second monitor. But here's the important point with this. This Studio Monitor here is not feeding this video out to the second Studio Monitor. What it basically does is it creates almost a proxy that says, I want you to go to whatever source I'm reading up here that I'm reading as my Studio Monitor, to feed as my NDI feed, and I want you to go and subscribe to that same source. So it isn't taking a feed out of here and sending it here. It's actually telling this second monitor to go to the same source I was going to and take this in now as a feed. So the original source is sending 2 feeds, and these 2 destinations get it. Why is this valuable? Say I want one producer in the studio. Say you're working with remote guests. You could have one producer in the studio that is controlling their studio monitor and changing between different remote guests that may be coming up. You could then have other members of the crew or other displays inside the studio follow whatever's on that studio monitor and be pulling that in as a source. So this gives you sort of a central point as a router, this NDI router capability as a central point to change the settings on all of the other studio monitors that you can have on a location. This can also be really cool for things that are sort of like signage based too. You could turn around and say, I have somebody in a control room that's changing the signage, but then all the signage in my auditorium or church or other venue, all those will change automatically. And that gives somebody that sort of direct control. So just different ways to do this and give somebody a control outside of a switcher to sort of go between different sources that could be feeding into monitors. So definitely, you know, a useful tool there. Okay, so let's see. The last thing, let me shut this down here. The last thing that I wanted to cover here, let's see if I can do this here. So the last thing I want to cover here is something that's called basically NDI KVM. So a KVM system is a way to have a keyboard, video, and mouse control actually be be set up and running as my sort of as a remote connection to a system. So what I'm going to show here though is I have something set up in on another system over here that is just, this is actually the system that drives our signage. So what I'd like to do is basically switch this into a 3-box if I can. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Oh. All right. Sorry. Just give me a second here. Oh. All right. This is the big one I wanted to show. So of course. Okay. I'm not getting any audio in my ears, so I'm trying to see if we can. Okay, hold on one second. Let's see here. Okay. All right, here we go. That was my fault, so I apologize. So here is the studio setup that we have. And this over here is what's driving the monitor behind me, actually. And this is one of the things I can do is inside. So let me sort of show this over here. I'll start that. If I go over to here, and because I'm not connected, let me go to this way. I can go and I have to run my screen capture. And one of the things you can do in screen capture is something called enable KVM. So this is now letting me tell the system, I want somebody to be able to connect to you and control your keyboard, mouse, and video. So that's what we said. So he's turned this on over here, and this is in screen capture that we have over here. In the NDI Studio Monitor, I can now go and connect to this. So I believe this is called second system. And so I would just connect to the screen capture, which is here. So now you can see that this is the second system. And up here, you'll notice that we now have something a little different here, which is called KVM. So if I click on this, I now, you can see, have control of what's going on in this second system. So I could take and do things where I just have other guests and do, so I can effectively run this remote system using Studio Monitor. And that means I can basically connect from anywhere that would have permission to access the NDI feed that's coming out from screen capture. So not only is this sort of a fantastic way to sort of manage from a single desk multiple systems if I needed to, because I could effectively think of this. I could set up a big monitor on screen, like say a 55-inch monitor, and have 4 NDI Studio monitors in there connected to different systems and just go through that. Now I have a KVM system where just moving the mouse and clicking on any one of those studio monitors just gets me into that system. So very, very powerful for that type of production control. It also can be great if you have gear that's mounted in a rack system or something like that outside of the control room. It gives you that remote access to there. But there's one real killer thing with this, and that is KVM works with NDI Bridge. Now, NDI Bridge, if you haven't used it, NDI Bridge allows you to connect across the internet to a remote location that you can then take and access NDI feeds from them, and they can access NDI feeds from you. So this means that using NDI Bridge and screen capture on different systems, you could have somebody remotely connect and control any of those systems. So where is this useful? Probably one of the main ones is in a cloud production. So you could set up in Amazon different systems that are running, run Bridge up there, so you could pull remote cameras. But in doing that, you also now have the ability to go in and do system-specific things by just connecting to any of those systems and managing them sort of either from an engineering or production line. So you could go there. So that's a great way to sort of do that sort of remote thing if you're not using just a desktop share like Teradici or something like that to actually go and control stuff on AWS. The other thing though is because it's NDI based, you can put rules in Access Manager to say who is allowed to access that NDI source. And by virtue of doing that, you can say, in effect, who's allowed to access that remote system. So this is really just a real killer function, and it's so useful when you are trying to do stuff. Definitely something that, can make your life really easy, both if you need remote engineering support, remote production support, as well as just sort of control in a normal studio production environment. Okay, so that really covers everything that I wanted to do in this first show of season 5. So thank you for dealing with us through a couple of the glitches we had here. But since there's so many different things all coming together live for the first time, despite testing, there's just a few things that were a little bit glitchy. So thank you for your patience. But if you can, I'd love you to, join us for the post show. We can talk about anything. We talk about the new set. I'll go through the remaining comments that people have put in since we last touched that. And, that would be great. If you can't, what we're trying for this year is to do shows every other week. So our next show will be 2 weeks from today. And that's, sort of the schedule we're looking. And we're hoping that on the intermittent Fridays, the ones between shows, we'll still be able to do something. Sometimes, it will be things around the neural net side of the world and things we're doing there. Others, it may be just short, interesting things that I want to post something on. So hopefully we'll be able to still fill out the schedule. Oh, excuse me. And give it a go. So if you can't join us for the post show, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And if you can, we'll see you in a minute. Take care, everyone. Thanks. Hello, welcome to the post show here. So thank you. And yes, Biz, the gremlins were messing things up. Unfortunately, the biggest gremlin was me. I mean, because we were switching a lot of stuff here with going back with the different monitors and the different systems here. I forgot to put something in the right spot. So that was just me not following my own show notes here that I had for everything. So. But yes, I'll call myself a gremlin and we'll let it go at that. So thanks everybody. Let's see, we have a few more things here. So let's see. I think we pull down the comments. Yes. So Aziz is asking if we would do a show on SRT and IP forwarding settings in the future. Absolutely, that's something that I do have on my list of things to cover. So that would be very cool to do as well. So good suggestion. Thank you. So Dave is saying when using Studio Monitor as a router, what is the CPU GPU hit on the system? So this is actually a really good question because it focuses on a point here. When working as an NDI router, what Studio Monitor is basically doing is it's telling a second system, whether it's Studio Monitor or an input on vMix or TriCast or whatever you're using, to go out and go to the original source and pull that in. So the load is just transactional for the messaging to tell the second system to go out and get the NDI source. But that's got a plus and a minus. So it means that you can use this on a lower powered system to sort of direct other systems. But the minus is that I can't do this to something like an NDI camera, which has limited processing capacity to send out multiple copies of a feed. It's like most cameras, if you ask it to do 2 feeds, it could be a little dicey. So this is something where you need to be aware in using it, what the source is and how many instances of my original source can be handled from that. So that's really something to keep in mind. But it doesn't put a load on the system that's actually telling it to do the switch on the Studio Monitor. That's saying go and route to another system. So cool. Thank you for asking that. That let me make sure I made that clear because I wasn't sure whether I did before. So Biz is saying that he could be in Philly with vMix and someone in Texas without vMix, but with Bridge, and they can have them using monitor control, the vMix telestrator. Yes, that is exactly that. You can get on and you could just do that. If you had it, the telestrator, just on a system locally, somebody else could be controlling that there. However, this means that if you're using something like a pen on the telestrator, since you're not physically present, you wouldn't be able to, because this is not a touch screen. So it's just whatever you could do with a mouse and the keyboard in telestrator is what you'd be able to do remotely there. So, that's something that, I haven't played a lot with telestration completely remote and how you would do that. So I'd have to see how much you could do, from a remote location, whether there's a way to, sort of send, because that's basically telestrator is just launching another web page to do that. So it may be possible to do that with port forwarding, let somebody use an iPad or something like that remotely to do that. So though you can do it, by, having that sort of control handled remotely, it may not give you exactly the capabilities you want. But something where port forwarding, sort of what Aziz was asking about if we do that with SRT, that same sort of thing where you could open a browser on a iPad with a pen in a remote location like Texas, and then that would be controlling that that browser would be connected to your studio, in Philly. So hopefully that makes sense. So so Michael's asking, What's my opinion on the minimal scoreboard in the Super Bowl? That's a good question. I actually didn't like it, and I had some specific reasons for that. Uh, First, it felt like they had to make it big to stand out enough. So I didn't think it was the best use of space. Uh, the second thing is that without having any sort of background separation, because it was just the elements directly, I just thought it was uncomfortable because it was uncommon. And that's probably an important, like when I think of doing things in a production, taking people out of their comfort zone when it's something that's ancillary to an event is not necessarily a good thing, because you want to make your audience comfortable and engaged. So because it was so different, I thought the Super Bowl was probably not the event to use it on. So that's really a lot of these things. There are other people I know that really liked it and thought, it was great and, a step up. And I can respect that. I was just sort of, from my own perspective, that was really where I was coming from. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not necessarily going to, claim that I have unique insight into that, but that's sort of it. So you're asking, which NDI protocol is Studio Monitor sending in? So Studio Monitor, if you're asking when I do the NDI routing, Studio Monitor doesn't send anything. What Studio Monitor is doing is telling a second source to go back to the original NDI source and subscribe to that. And so it basically acts like a proxy that sits inside that source and switches what it's seeing. So that's all it's doing. But that original connection that you had with that first Studio Monitor, that it makes a second connection back to that device. So if it's sending HX2, HX3, or full bandwidth NDI, that's exactly what will be coming across. Studio Monitor can decode all of the different flavors. So the HX2, HX3, and full bandwidth NDI. So hopefully that was clear. I'm guessing I'm not doing a good job explaining this. So let me see. Unlike a store and forward, I think it is. This is something that is. This is something that really is just a redirect. I'm going back and saying, go back and get the original. And I'm not doing something that has anything to do with routing, like direct routing through me. This is just going back and it's notifying and saying, make your peer connection back to the NDI source. So yeah, so Biz is saying that he knows about the port forwarding thing. Yeah, it isn't always an option, and that can be problematic. So you get that as an ability, but again, things like the touch panel type things do not, at least right now, that's not something that NDI Studio Monitor would transmit. So you wouldn't get that level of control. But hopefully, it could work. So let's see. When I was talking, Biz is talking about Studio Monitor for replay, you actually get NDI sources that are available on your sort of A and B feeds for when you're doing replay. Sort of, you have two replay channels, and you can actually pull those out and read them in as NDI. So you could set something up where you're using it to monitor what you have going on in replay and do that. And it's something where you could switch it. So if I'm doing a replay on A or on B, I could make sure I'm subscribing to the right one, things like that. But it doesn't something, it isn't something specifically related to how you would do replay. You are recording. So in that sense, you have the ability to record in the Studio Monitor, and you could put, and because that's a known directory, you could actually go potentially and just drag that into something and use that sort of later. But it's not really a replay in the sense that you could do something quickly. That would be something where if I had a capture and I wanted to pull something, you could do it. But again, it was a very light connection to replay. So there was nothing deeper there for doing that. So sorry if I implied otherwise. So let's see. So as we're doing this, since we got one of the questions I want to ask you is how does everybody like sort of the new look and feel? I know we've changed a few things here, and we've tried to streamline stuff, sort of make the post show a little more. So it sort of was cut up, and I didn't really care for it. So this is something we wanted to try to make it a little more accessible. So the comments and the call in and, my video were always there. Just let me know, anything you post. I love the feedback, even if it's not live, just reach out, message me. So Business saying, he's saying, call me slow, but I'm still lost on the NDI routing. Okay, no, that's fair enough. So basically, let me actually do, since I am doing this, let me go back and I'm just going to show you something. We'll just take this here coming from vMix. So let me go in and do this as let me switch over and do this as a demo here. So I have this set up here, and this is my NDI monitor here. That's coming in. And when I click here, what I'm doing is I am basically telling NDI monitor to go to a specific source and a specific stream and display that here. When I have a second NDI monitor come in, what I'm effectively doing is the same thing I'm doing with this pull down here. All I'm doing now with this acting as a router is I'm telling that second monitor to go to the same source that I have here, which is my secondary and, guest one, I think this is. So go to this source here and ask it to send you the stream as well. So this first monitor, the system that's running the studio monitor, is not sending the stream at all. All it's doing is it's telling the second monitor, the second input in vMix that you have, whatever it is that's reading this NDI output from here, it's not really an NDI output. It's simply a proxy. And it's telling that system to do the exact same thing it's doing with selecting a source and a stream in that source for NDI. So it's not pulling anything from this system here. It is only pulling it as it's only telling it what to do, but it isn't sending it the video itself. It has to go out and get it itself. So hopefully that makes sense. And I apologize if that's been unclear, but that's all it's doing. So, and feel free, just post, comments in our Streaming Alchemy group on Facebook or in the video when it goes up on YouTube, and I'll try to get, and give as more detail as I can. So in terms of bandwidth utilization, it is consuming exactly, it's not consuming any bandwidth from the system that is the main NDI Studio Monitor. So all that system needs to do is basically send messages. It's just doing control information to that second source to say, go out and get the same video the same NDI source that I'm looking at. You go and get it from the same original source. So that gives you that sort of, it's segmented. It's like you have your monitor and studio monitor, and all that's doing is telling the other one what to do, but it's not sending the video or audio there. So the bandwidth is de minimis. It's just whatever that control information needed across NDI, but outside of that, There's nothing else that's needed. So because I've talked about this in the context of Studio Monitor, but there is an NDI tool. Let me see, see if I can, I don't have this set up here, but there is an NDI tool called NDI Router, which is a much more sophisticated version of that, where you could take a whole range of NDI sources and route them to different endpoints. So a far more advanced version of that operates in the same way. It's only basically, it's letting you tell another source where to go to get its NDI feed, but it's not sending it. So again, very low utilization and bandwidth from the NDI Studio Monitor system. It's going to double the bandwidth out from the NDI sending system. So if it was sending one stream, it's now sending 2 copies of that stream. So, Michael, thank you. We're definitely open to any sort of constructive feedback here, because we're really trying to dial this in, and we figured this was the season to do it. We wanted to make a push to try to get things looking a little bit better and better lit and everything. So, Bill, thank you. I appreciate that. So, okay. Thank you, Biz. Like I said, I appreciate that. There were a lot of late night arguments over how things should look as we went back and forth. So the feedback is very welcome. Thanks. So Gene, thank you. Great to have you here. Glad you could make it for the show. Dave, exactly. That's it. It is a traffic director, but it doesn't physically move the video bits, through its system to another. So thank you. So Michael's asking about using multicast on NDI sources. Multicast. So let me take a step back. What multicast does is it lets you basically create what is effectively a broadcast channel. But more specifically, it is a channel that multiple endpoints can subscribe to. So it just puts one stream out, and then multiple people can pick up, multiple systems downstream can pick up that stream and display it. In theory, this would be a great way to handle it. The problem is that most networks have little tweaks to how multicast is handled. So different switches, the like Netgear switches or whatever, different switches can have different things set up for how it handles multicast. And things may not traverse exactly the way you think on these networks. So if you were to do this on a fixed install, that could work really, really well. And that would probably be, definitely worth the IT investment in getting that set up. But if you were doing this in something that you were setting up and tearing down, and you depended to a certain extent on foreign network infrastructure as well as your own for production, I would just be careful, because you could end up finding that things suddenly don't work right, or are stuttering, or any one of a variety of sort of symptomatic problems that, could be causing issues for you. So that's just technically yes is the answer. But from a practical point of view, it's just use it with caution. Because I've gotten that feedback from many people that, they've been bitten by, as Biz called it, little gremlins that sort of crept in, and they weren't really able to nail it because it wasn't all under their control. So is there any NDI hardware as well? So there's plenty of converter units that are, so you have, well, let me sort of take a step back. So in talking about NDI hardware, there are cameras, so which are basically, PTZ Optics makes cameras, BirdDog makes cameras, Panasonic, Sony, all of them make cameras that support NDI. So that's sort of one level of, NDI based hardware. The next level is what would be sort of converters and adapters. So if you have a camera that does not natively support NDI, like right now, our main camera is a Sony FX30, and that does not support NDI, but we are using a BirdDog Flex and HDMI out of that to create the video feed that we're seeing and send that over NDI. So there are a ton of that. There's BirdDog, Magewell, a lot of other, KiloView is another one that makes NDI based converters and adapters. AJA is another one that makes a lot of them. So there's adapters and converters that do that, and they do that on the input as well as on the output. So behind me on that monitor, that's using a BirdDog Play to show the image on the monitor back there. And that's taking a NDI feed in and converting that to an HDMI out. And so that's how that monitor is driven. So different converters that way. There are also some sort of native baked-in converters. So for instance, Mackie has a audio mixer out. I think it's the Mackie, it's DLZ or something. I'm not exactly sure, but that will let you take in NDI audio feeds and control that as a mixer. So that's another thing which is sort of built in as sort of at a low level hardware level. So that's something there. Another piece of sort of hardware is in NDI 6, which is the latest revision of NDI. They actually have a hardware embeddable version of Bridge for transmitting. So in addition to something like SRT now, this would let you embed this in a camera and have that camera connect to a studio via NDI Bridge without having to have another bridge computer at the remote location. So that's another example of the NDI baked into the hardware. So there are a few sort of examples of how this all can work with sort of hardware, but at its core, and this is important, NDI is software, and it's software that's implemented in an embedded way in hardware, or it's software that's run on computers as just applications. So it's best when you think of it, even if you're looking at it as a piece of hardware, to consider it basically software that's embedded in a hardware platform. All right. So let me see here. Okay. Got anything else here? Just want to. All right. So let's see. Okay. So Biz has one more question. He's very familiar with vMix Web Controller. Can you touch a little bit more on the monitor version, please? Okay. Basically, what you're doing with, so let me switch back and we'll go into sort of demo over here since I have this. I have another computer over here. So if I were to come in here, and this is what we were doing before, if I click here and then click on, let's see, KVM, I am now controlling this monitor directly. And anything that I do here, so let me just show you, because I'm going to zoom this in. So since this is NDI here, let me switch this off, pop this full screen here. And now I'm going to go KVM. So now you can see what I effectively have right here in front of me is a full screen monitor. And I could, if I, on my vMix station, set up screen capture and then used Bridge, NDI Bridge, to connect to it remotely, I am now controlling this remote system directly from my monitor here. And this can be just like across the network here, or it could be across the internet. So either way would work. So this is a full-fledged keyboard, mouse, and video control. In addition, if I wanted to do this way, I could use, they're called HDMI dummy plugs. So say I had a vMix station that was set up and it only had just sort of the control interface on it, or no interface at all. It's just something. I could plug in these HDMI dummy plugs. They're just little plugs that look like an HDMI cable with a plug on the end that look like, to the system, like a monitor. So I could turn around and say, I actually want to have my vMix out, my vMix desktop, that's one. I also want to have my full screen outputs, things like that. I want to have NDI outputs from that local. You could just plug those in and I would see each of those as individual monitors. And if you, before I mentioned, you could set up like a big screen, like say a 50-inch monitor with 4 quadrants, you could do exactly that. I could set something up where I'm controlling the main vMix interface and have other monitor interfaces that are sitting up there to let me see what's going on. So definitely different ways to do this, to capture this information and control this remotely. This would also work if you were doing this in a cloud. I mean, basically no difference between a cloud environment and your own environment. It's just who's hosting the hardware. But if you're accessing it remotely, it would work the same way. So, and never an issue with this. So, Fritz is talking about Zen video tools. Yes, there are other tools out there, and thanks for calling that out, Fritz. There are, and I know, I've seen the stuff that Zen Video Tools has been producing. They've been sort of a long time provider in this space of different NDI software solutions. So definitely, if you would like to support them, I think that would definitely be a good idea. Thanks, Fritz, for pointing that out. So let's see. Yes, so that is exactly what those fake HDMI thingies are. They're called dummy plugs. That I've had other names. You can use them with the so if you have like a lot of the newer graphics cards now have like one HDMI port and display ports, you can use a display port to HDMI adapter and they will work with that as well. So something to keep in mind. But that will give you multiple monitors. And that is exactly what you would do if you would just setting up a system designed for remote use. You wouldn't even have a local monitor in it necessarily. You probably would have one for sort of local control, but all your other monitors would just be dummy plugs, and you could set up a 4-monitor remote system to control it. So really cool stuff with that. Let's see. All right. Let's see. I think making sure, see if we've covered everything here. All right. I think we have probably gone through everything that I wanted to cover. So I just want to say thank you for joining us for today's show and for hanging out for as long as everybody has in the post show here. We're really looking forward to this new season. I do apologize for the glitchiness we've had. We'll sort of take this as our a learning experience and try to squash everything. Biz, thank you. I appreciate it. And I just want to say, to everybody that's been hanging with us, thank you. I really appreciate all the support we get and that you are part of this community here. Jesper, thank you. I really appreciate you being here. So, all right, everybody. So I will see all of you again in 2 weeks. Until then, be safe, be well. Take care.